Okay, we have 3 o'clock now. Guess it's a good idea to start. Welcome to our webinar with Christina Sterenborg and myself. This is Rainer Michaeli. I happen to be the director of the Institute for Competitive Intelligence, and we are hosting this webinar with Christina today. The title really gives it all away. Grasping the Future, Scenario Planning turns into a key tool in the telco industry. Let me introduce a few words about the Institute for Competitive Intelligence and our speaker for today, and then I will hand over straight away to Christina for her presentation, which will take some 20-25 minutes, and after that we have the possibility to chat with each other using the chat function in your window on the right side usually. This is then how we can communicate and make it happen. Yeah, as I said already, I'm Rainer Michaeli, Director of the Institute for Competitive Intelligence. The Institute is all about education, training in competitive/market intelligence. We do this now for more than 10 years. And of course, throughout our training, we encounter a lot of people in various industries and always try to pick up the latest trends, the hottest challenges, and of course, learning about the discipline of intelligence in our application. So we need and we want to stay as state of the art, obviously. How do we get there? Well, one thing is, of course, we have an annual conference coming up in April, where again, we invite the hot top speaker virtually on a global base. We invite some scientists in the field to do research, to try to advance the field. And yes, we do webinars as today. So we always try to listen in, learn, and see how practitioners do practice and advance competitive versus and market intelligence. Today's speaker, that's Christina Sterenborg. You're with us, Christina, right?
I'm with you.
Oh, thank you. So it's always good to have a quick audio check because we're obviously not sitting in the same room. But Christina is in Bonn, where she's working for Deutsche Telekom. Some people might know this is pretty much the headquarters of the Deutsche Telekom. Since 2012, she heads there the market and competitive intelligence for Deutsche Telekom. Part of this whole setting is that she is and set up actually an international strategic market intelligence unit. Amongst her many projects that she's done, this is at being customer satisfaction surveys, definition of business and governance models, selection, implementation of business intelligence tools, wargaming session, and of course, building of teams, structures, and processes all around that. Christina, born in Austria, holds a bachelor degree in business management, marketing, and related support services from the Johannes Kepler University in Linz, Austria, obviously. And she holds as well an MBA in telecommunications management from Alaska Pacific University. Yeah, I met her several years ago, and I can only underline that she's very charming, outgoing, and definitely a truly professional when it comes to competitive and market intelligence. So I guess we're all looking forward to hearing her presentation, seeing her slides, and simply sharing with her a bit about her experience. As I've said, you have a chance to send chat messages. This is pretty much in the window of the GoToMeeting frame. Just try it out. You can shoot a message whenever you want to, but we might collect them and really bring them up when Christina has finished her slides presentation and simply add some 15, 20 minutes of question and answer there. You should see the screen, PowerPoint, and you should hear 2 voices. That's pretty much it. There's no other communication channel, especially we're not allowing you to speak. So just keep your microphones muted, so otherwise it would be too noisy from the background. Okay, Christina, I guess it's up to you to click and really start your session.
Wow, it's working.
It is.
Well, thank you for the nice introduction. Yes, I'm working in the international division of Deutsche Telekom, meaning I'm dealing with 12 NatCos, reaching out from the Netherlands down to Macedonia, Albania, Greece, Romania, which makes my life very heterogeneous and diverse, which I really enjoy. And my focus is lately more on enabling our NatCos with methods and tools, support other functions with CI ideas, with CI methods. And therefore, I'm also stressing today a little bit the role of CI experts in scenario planning, which was originally a task purely left for strategy experts. But I will show that there are, of course, different aspects to the whole topic, and that there are facets that you might have encountered already, and where you might feel more comfortable to fill in and to contribute with your CI expertise in the future more. So let's get started. What I will talk about today are mainly four topics. First of all, I will talk about our lives and how technology is changing our lives, because in our daily work at Deutsche Telekom, of course, we rely heavily on technology. Our customers are relying on technology, and we are, of course, enabling our customers to use the technology to make their lives easier. And I will also show how CI experts can provide value in this environment, how we do it at Deutsche Telekom, and how we also learn to operate and look into the future in environments that are, of course, relatively uncertain. If you look at technology, I will explain it to you right now, how it changed, and then you will understand why we just cannot use traditional forecasting methods anymore. So if you look at your daily life, I'm sure you will see that many applications, many things we do daily have changed. I'm not talking about, phones and SMS, because this is really obvious. But have you ever thought about online dating? Have you ever thought about the taxi business? Of course, I'm sure many of you are now reading books and newspapers via electronic media, ebooks, tablets, etc. But did you know that Uber is so successful that the traditional British taxi driver school had to shut down? That Uber generates more than 10 billion US dollar revenues without even owning their own fleet. In 2013, they only generated $690 million revenue. So our lives are changing. The means how we do things and our tools are changing. And this, of course, has an impact on us building the networks that are running all those applications and data centers, connecting people, connecting companies everywhere, no matter where you are on the planet and anytime. So if you look at key players, let me just point out BlackBerry, then you will see what has changed. BlackBerry was the first device for mobile email. I think they started around 2006. And everybody in those days said, well, why do I need a BlackBerry? Then it was a complete hype around 2010 with $15 million sold devices, And then, of course, Apple came in, Android came in, and now BlackBerry is really struggling. Their number of devices sold is down to 7 million. So you can see how technology adoption is really influencing companies. Newcomers, of course, beyond the internet players we all know, are also in our supplier industry. If you look at Lucent or Alcatel-Lucent, doesn't exist anymore, was bought by Nokia most recently. Nokia doesn't do any phones anymore. Their phone division was bought by Microsoft. Motorola, probably everybody remembers Motorola Razr, no more anymore. So you see that there is a change going on. And of course, this affects us significantly. Not only you in your life, but of course, our company. Our business model has been very stable and very traditional. We built the networks. Our regulator approved the services we were supposed to launch. They also regulated pricing, wholesale, retail pricing. And this was the environment we are operating in. So we invested billions in networks, and then the regulator comes along and tells us, yeah, what we should do, what we're not supposed to do. And of course, we have a long period of returns on investment on those networks. But if we look into the future, what happens? 1,000 social robots are currently sold by SoftBank in Japan. You come home and the robot talks to you and tells you about, how the day was, and chit chats, shows some TV shows, and also does some search functionalities, books trips for you, connects to your mom. It is amazing what these devices of the future can do. We all know about the self-driving cars and connected cars. We also know about Google offering all kinds of communication services, and most recently also experimenting with infrastructure. So they are entering our ecosystem, our business models, but turning them upside down because they don't charge for connectivity. They more or less ride on our networks, but they don't pay for it. We're also talking cloud. What does that mean? Well, in former days, you had your data stored at home at your PC and your laptop. Nowadays, you upload it in your Amazon cloud, in your Google cloud, in your Microsoft cloud, and it resides somewhere in data centers. So we, of course, have a big security question. What happens to our personal data? Our smart homes, they want to be connected too, ranging from regulated light or heating systems up to also remote video surveillance. These devices are all connected, and they are connected via fixed and wireless networks. And you want them to work reliably, right? So what happens with us? We are transformed by technology, by suppliers, by internet players, by customers, by you guys, because we need to provide and fulfill your demand. And on the other side, of course, we are transforming. We develop new standards for the network. If we look into the work we do also with Cisco or with other providers, separating hardware from software, coming up with complete new production models, because of course cost is going down significantly, revenue is going down significantly. We have to somehow balance this new ecosystem. And looking at the next slide, you will see that the revenue and the whole value of the telco industry is declining because, of course, you don't want to pay for your WhatsApp or Facebook usage. So what does that mean? We are, of course, in a very difficult situation because we are driving change and we are transformed from the outside in. How do we operate in these environments? How can a function at Deutsche Telekom know what happens tomorrow? Well, those standards and those technologies are not transforming on a daily basis. So this is the good news. But of course, on the other side, the way we work changes. And this is not something that is really specific for the telco industry, but of course for many industries, because digitization is changing the processes of every industry. You know, the Internet of Things term is relating to those new processes, to the online processes, connected city, smart city, autonomous machines. These are all future projects we are working on with customers and suppliers on, of course, providing new processes. This means we have to change too, but we need also to plan for this future. We need to plan our revenues. We need to plan our CapEx, OpEx, our investment. We need to prioritize the resources. How do we do that in such an insecure environment? And I'm sure your industry is also facing similar problems. So I think scenario planning is one of the tools that will help us significantly to cope with future uncertain developments. So why is that? If you look back, we did our market planning by forecasting services and product development, relying on the estimates of the product managers. And then we summarized and aggregated all the individual opinions and extrapolated the forecast. However, how do we know what kind of third-party services we will offer? Like many NUTCOs offer a free Facebook. This puts strain on the network. This requires investment, but doesn't really monetize very soon. So we have disruptive factors coming into the future that we just cannot describe in the way we did. Scenarios are a way that can describe different futures. They can describe within a certain defined framework developments that we foresee with methods, factors, knowledge, technologies that we kind of can define already today, because we know our trends. We know what will happen in the technology area in the next 5 years, potentially. Scenarios are reasonable. They are defined by experts. They are defined in a framework of factors that are within the current set of known factors. But the combination of those factors, the prioritization and the correlation to each other, this is what we can shape differently in scenarios. Scenarios also should be relevant to the business context. Of course, you can define some blue sky scenario and think of, okay, what will happen if AT&T or Huawei, let's say Huawei will build a global telco. These are scenarios that, of course, can be someday true, but they are so far out that they are not relevant for business planning, let's say, for our planning cycle within the next 5 years. So they should be relevant to the business context, they should be credible, and also pretty logical, consistent with the known facts. Scenario can be a combination of qualitative and quantitative elements, because once you define your factors and developments, you can prioritize them quantitatively if you have the data, or you can just purely rely on qualitative elements. So there is no right or wrong. It depends on the framework and on the objective you want to achieve. I briefly touched on the framework of how we used to do forecasts or also predictions of the future. We used to look into trends on a very isolated way and said, okay, what will happen if, let's say, eSIM will be in all devices? But of course, there are so many factors connected with each other that a single silo approach does not really give an objective or a reasonable picture of the opportunities we have. So the connection of several trends within a framework of, let's say, time, uncertainty, business impact, or acceleration of adoption will definitely be more work, be more complex in the whole process, will involve more people, but it will probably be better because it shows a wider range of possible future developments and opportunities or even threats for your business. So make sure that you define exactly what you want in the beginning, and then don't be afraid of the amount of work that lies ahead of you, because it's definitely worth it than just looking into single trend development. This can be the basis, of course, and this is where we'll also we'll talk about how CI experts come in. But let's look at the funnel on the slide. You will see that the combination and evaluation of factors already define a range of scenario opportunities or limits that gives you a range where you can operate with. There are many kinds of scenarios. During my research, I was really surprised because, of course, we operate in a very, let's say, strategic environment, having defined scenarios already for the telco industry. But I discovered very interesting concepts of blue sky scenarios or button down scenarios, which on the one hand side are open to everything, very creative. Blue sky scenario, only the sky is the limit. It's in the name. On the other side, the button down scenario is very conservative, constrained variation of the future. What you usually do is you take two scenarios, two extreme scenarios, like for instance, how we define mostly during network planning is a do nothing scenario versus a competitive scenario. These are our extremes. So we kind of operate within this framework of the two extreme scenarios. And then there are two or three medium conservative scenarios that we design. And then we define potential threats or opportunities. But of course, you can also have fallback scenarios or high-risk scenarios. You can have best case, worst case, which probably most of you know anyway. So yes, there are a lot of words for a lot of different depictions of the future. Make sure to be really thorough with the evaluation of your development, because the range of significance and business impact is important when defining a set of factors describing a scenario. When do we use scenarios? Well, in the academic way, we look into the future by better understanding the uncertainties of the future. And this is a completely fair approach. We need those scenarios to evaluate our industry, to separate also noise from potentially significant early signals. We explore new technologies. Of course, more lately, you all have heard about 5G and Internet of Things. We define use cases based on potential new bandwidth development, new standards, new devices. This is our daily bread and butter. So we want to create, of course, a first mover advantage using those tools. And of course, as stated already, scenario planning is used during strategic planning for market shaping, market descriptions, market forecasts, for decision making in M&A or divest processes, or also entering new markets, also leaving markets. It's all based on different scenarios. Why did I color the educational and communicational scenario differently? Well, it's also a means of looking into the future, but it is more geared towards a descriptive approach. So what we're doing in our HR department, we are describing future work process, future work environment, and supporting a transformation process. So scenarios are used to describe also future behavior of customers. They are serving to stimulate the thinking, but they are not as much dealing with uncertainties per se, but they are trying to educate people and take away fear from uncertainties within their very close environment. So this is why I think it's not as much a tool to support a proper decision-making process, but rather an educational method, but also valid, of course, maybe just with a different time horizon and a different objective. Now moving on and diving more deeper in the differentiation between scenarios, how we use it and how I see it at Deutsche Telekom, we differentiate clearly between a strategic purpose dealing with uncertainty. These would be the scenarios at the right side. So if we look at our R&D department in Berlin, they deal with technology innovation. They look into how would a customer in 10 years from now use our future products. What would they request? So they are working with startups. They are doing focus groups. They are just monitoring users, how they live, and then derive potential product ideas. Of course, we also look into very, very far and distant development of artificial intelligence, how these researches and developments could potentially impact our business model. I talked about market planning, and of course, we're also looking into competition from a functional perspective, not only from a strategic perspective. So how do our competitors roll out the networks? Do they go into more capacity planning? Are they more going into population coverage planning? With which suppliers are they working with, and what potentially could we derive from those learnings? These would be the more strategic scenarios, and they are undergoing a regular revision on a maybe quarterly, biannual, or semi-annual and an annual basis. And then I also discovered a more operational, a descriptive scenario technique or analysis in our company that is done more or less one time. So the most operational scenarios I found were in our network testing facility, where we test different features, new platforms or new devices. We have the luxury of being able to set up also here in Bonn different telco networks from other countries and simulate their performance. We also, as I talked about, are building scenarios for how our people will work in the future, and not in the distant future, but in the close future. So working from home, working via telepresence, etc. We also look from an operational perspective, of course, into customer behavior and customer satisfaction. And we also look at segmentation planning and spectrum auction scenario planning, which is only done for the spectrum auction purposes And then, of course, it's not revised, because when the auction is over and spectrum is allocated, then that's it. So these are kind of the different application frameworks, how we deal with scenarios. Some complying with the full academic definition, some are more pragmatic, but nevertheless, they show that we need a set of different options to test, to work, to find a way to deal with frameworks. But how can CI experts play a role in all this? Can only strategy people, or maybe technology people or marketing people work on scenarios? Well, looking at my experience, I have to say a clear no. It depends, of course, on the organizational and governance setup of the company, but CI people are very valuable. If you look at the stages of scenario planning, I would say we have 4 really key elements where we are needed and need CI experts. So before we start with some scenario planning, the ideal environment, or let's say mode, would be that we as CI experts identify some unregular noise or developments in the industry. A good example was some years ago when we all of a sudden discovered, well, there's a lot of talk about Google and MVNO, and what is going on? You know, a lot of news popped up all of a sudden. It was April 2014. So we monitored these keywords, and we saw that there is a relevance increasing. And 2 months later, Google launched Fi, which is, of course, a disruptive element for us, because they offer it for free on invitation base only in those days. But nevertheless, what will happen? So clear trigger for, yes, scenario planning. And this is what we did. And this is the ideal situation for CI experts, of course. Also, for identifying trends and evaluating trends that are already, in the industry, we can play a, a significant role and work with the functions, because they might not know the holistic picture, the strategic picture of a certain competitor, for instance. And therefore, when we look into certain competitors or peers, we have experts who do that, and they understand the big picture, and then they can filter out the noise from real important developments. And of course, we can deliver value by thinking of midterm disruptions. If you look into the future 5 years from now, you can be sure that this is not going to happen the way you predicted. Nevertheless, not thinking of the scenario that you have defined, and whether you defined all the factors and weighed them and evaluated them, but you can never ever think of everything that could happen. So I think there we really need to know what kind of scenarios have been defined and monitor them, and then raise early flags or threats at the moment we see that certain factors are not going into the direction that we wanted them or we predicted them to be. We can also provide a good value in defining scenarios and bringing them to life. We did a good exercise with wargaming. In those days, it was, I think, Vodafone wargaming, because they said they wanted to start fixed line operations. Of course, nobody believed really that Vodafone would build their own fixed line infrastructure. And so we did wargaming to see, okay, how are they going to do that? What would be, a disruptive factor in helping them to speed up their usual wholesale resale approach. And we identified some disruptive elements in those days with the wargaming exercise, and one of them really came into place. And so I think using different CI tools at different stages will definitely provide a lot of value for the organization. And therefore, we should work with functions and with corporate strategy or with local strategies to make sure that we provide our expertise and our tools to them to help them with the scenarios. Having said that, let me summarize the key takeaways. So yes, I think the formulation and the objective and the purpose for the scenario planning is most important, because the more blurry you are at the first stage, the more complicated it gets later. So talking about the Vodafone example, or also talking about network rollout scenarios, clearly define the scope and the objective, and then go ahead and define your factors, drivers, trends, inhibitors. You have to bear in mind that scenarios are not a crystal ball. So you will definitely not hit the future right on spot, but it will definitely help you to get a more holistic, broader picture, and to maybe stir some thinking that you wouldn't do when you go the regular way. Be also sure that in your team you have all kind of different experts that might, also have differences and different views on the reality, but exactly this is what you need to get a very heterogeneous picture of future developments. Most scenarios in the industry are developed in a pragmatic way, not always the way academia wants it to do, because we just don't have the time. I remember that T-Lab set up a project where they identified 89 developments for the basis for the scenarios. So if you then have to evaluate 89 drivers and also check the correlation and score and rank them, it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. So be sure to be pragmatic there. I already mentioned that I truly believe CI experts are a valuable part of the whole exercise in the role as a trigger, but also as a challenger. And I think that there is one caveat I encountered, and I also see in my practice. There are a lot of analysts shaping and designing very interesting scenarios, but they kind of limit our horizon. So you can, of course, accelerate your thinking and your scenario building by using existing scenarios, but I think it's also a danger because it limits you and kind of maneuvers you into a certain direction, which you might, lose out and don't see developments that might also be valuable to you. So this is it. I'm done.
Yes, so thank you very much. This is Rainer Michaeli. For those who joined later, I'm hosting this session from the Institute for Competitive Intelligence. So now it's a good idea to send us questions via the chat function. I received already some, and there's plenty time, so we're well into our timing for more to come. So let me read out these questions, Christina, and then please try to answer. Here's a question. Do you use a centralized scenario team at Deutsche Telekom, or do you have decentralized, scenario teams, I assume? Of course, Deutsche Telekom is a pretty big company, so chances are everything is somehow organized, centralized, or even distributed. I don't know. So here we go.
To tell you the truth, it depends on the scope of the project and on the objective of the project. There are definitely projects that are multi-country, and then we will, of course, enable a more centralized process because it's of value to pull together the resources of different NatCos. But if we do a spectrum auction in a certain country, then it does not make sense to centralize it, but then we support our colleagues in the NatCo if they, request support, and then we do it on a very local basis. So it depends on the objective.
I guess the question goes along the lines of, do you have some kind of specialist team, central specialists, and these specialists are then sent to national teams to support the process, not necessarily the content, I guess. So is this a kind of core team that you have for scenario development?
Well, if we would live in a different enterprise cycle of the industry, I would say, yes, of course, we would have that. And we used to have that. But I showed you the recent developments of the telco industry. And of course, we're undergoing some significant headcount reduction.
Okay.
Just in a very pragmatic way on this topic, we would have to, save some resources sitting around and then waiting for a scenario exercise to come up. No, but we have, of course, teams in group innovation, as I mentioned, in the T labs that are focusing on scenario building for special new technologies. So they do it on a regular basis, but not exclusively. If we then, need some kind of input, we definitely ask, our experts in the unit. But no, there is no dedicated team.
Okay. Here's the next question. How many parameters / drivers, so scenario parameters, scenario drivers, are feasible? I think you mentioned 89 as one big project that really didn't fly. So what is a good rule of thumb for you when you develop scenarios?
Well, the 89 factor scenario did fly. It was just a lot of work.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't want to sort of offend any approaches your end, but I can assume 89 times 89 is a lot of cells.
Yeah.
Where you have to do this cross impact or whatever consistency checking. So this is huge. So what's more feasible, let's say, or more pragmatic, as you said? What is a kind of good idea to start with, or limit yourself when it comes to a scenario, the drivers?
Well, first of all, you start, of course, with kind of a brainstorming or expert interview exercise to define your ecosystem according to the objective. And there I would not limit myself. And then we start to rank these and say, okay, what are the most plausible within the time frame? Let's say the FMC case. So convergent products are, of course, a trend of the industry, and they are shaping the industry, also going along with technology convergence. And therefore, you have to clearly define the objective and then be brutal. Just define your range of the most relevant and least relevant factors, cluster them, and then I would say maybe pro scenario maximum of 5 to 7, and then that's it.
Okay.
That's a lot to describe and to bear in mind.
Okay, no, fair enough. How long does such a scenario development process take? So I guess the term is how long does it take to build it, to set up everything?
It again depends on the scope, of course, and whether you really want to build some Excel models behind it, or you rather go with the pragmatic approach.
So give us some idea if it's sort of very.
Well, we with the market planning example, we are working, let's say, 4 to 6 months on 12 markets.
Okay.
And with the CapEx planning for our NatCos, it's about the same range,
Okay, and these are based on some 5 to 7 parameters. So
Yeah, we have looking into the network planning. As I said, we have 3 scenarios. We have the do nothing case, we have the highly competitive case, and then we have the medium case. And for each case and for each country, we define 5 to 7
Okay.
parameters and then try to quantify them and build the scenarios and derive also the quantification of those scenarios, because we need also to describe the CapEx requirements.
Okay, fair enough. No, thank you that you elaborated a little bit on that. Next question. How do you predict discontinuities with scenarios?
Well, if I could predict it, I would not sit here in this scenario.
but no, I think the point is, of course, there's prediction is maybe a bit ambiguous term. One is to identify, and then how to factor in.
Understood. You need the luxury of having good CI experts who know either the industry very well, the market very well, or the players very well. As I said, for instance, Google is a good example for our industry because they're playing around with a lot of different ideas. Mm-hmm. And you never know where they will get serious. So when they launch their balloons, everybody laughed. When they started with building fiber in the US, everybody said, yeah, well, right, you know, and Google itself always says, no, we don't want to become a telco. But I'm sure, you know, looking at the development of the industry and the technology, there could be so many facets and aspects that we just cannot foresee right now. Maybe there is a new technology within the next 5 years that satellites become so cheap that Google starts launching satellites, and what then? Mm-hmm. So these are all disruptions we have to think about and, you know, potentially evaluate, but it kind of also is disrupting to the work scope we have, because then we would need some people sitting in a lab thinking about those developments. And of course we screen it and we are aware of it. We go to conferences, we listen to Google. Google is also one of our partners, so we are in a competitive environment. So we're partnering with our competitors depending on the business models and products and areas or even geographical markets. And this makes it even more complex.
So
but yeah, you only can try.
Discontinuities are rather input to your scenarios and not result or outcome, if I understand correctly.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So just as an add-on question, do you have, you mentioned kind of technology scouting as an exercise to discover discontinuities, to identify discontinuities?
Definitely. We're doing trend scouting for technologies, and mm-hmm. our technology radar is a regular exercise and has been for years, and I hope it will continue because this is core in our industry, of course.
Sure. Okay, next question. What are typical scenario horizons, especially given that your product life cycles versus the investment cycles are pretty, well, divergent? So everything's changing all over, but you really can't invest quick enough to capture everything. So what is a typical scenario horizon then?
It depends on the objective of the scenario, but if you talk about financial planning, of course, there has to be a high correlation to our financial planning cycle. And I think this is confidential information, so I cannot talk about our internal financial planning. But of course, there is a high correlation to that.
Yes.
And there is semi-annual revision, of course. So we look into the local developments and talk with our NatCos on a regular basis if there should be any disruption or a significant change in a competitor's network rollout or product launch, then of course we have to react, and we always also try to be first and be technology leader. So yeah.
Okay, I mean, fair enough if there's some confidentiality here, but then turn the question around. How long does a scenario and all its revision really survive? because there must be a kind of limited duration of any given scenario, given the product lifecycle developments. So how long can you use a scenario?
Well, looking at product life cycles, it's an interesting question because we all thought that voice would be dead, and we're still talking on our phones, however, less and less. So the product life cycle phase out is long. Also, SMS is still used, but there are different kind of application scenarios. If I look at application to peer messaging, so we're using more transaction identification SMSs, or even if you set up a Google or a Facebook account, you need an SMS for authentication. Yeah, so we revise the scenarios definitely, as I said, on a regular basis, especially the financial scenarios and also network planning.
Okay. Okay, so there's still time if you want to send in some questions via chat function. My final one for you, Christina, do you use any software tools to develop or visualize scenarios?
Not the scenario per se, but of course the driver monitoring is done, and we're working on an analytical regular process for functions depending on the objectives and the drivers of the scenario. So let me be more clear. We will look into LTE development of our competitors, same as our competitors do with us. So this is not a secret because it's public available data, and we have to report it because we have spectrum auction requirements, and therefore we have to fulfill certain coverage requirements in a certain time. And this is what we also track, you know, and therefore we use our Minerva tool to track certain developments, or as I said, the Google example, where we really tracked the fact or the keyword combination Google and MVNO, and saw the development and the importance grow over a certain amount of time. And therefore you can, of course, with your human intelligence, evaluate whether it's a hype or whether it's a real threat for the company.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I think this is pretty much the questions that our participants sent in. So could you please click to the next and final slide, Christina?
I'm clicking. You know, it's not me. I have to click twice. No,
okay. Yeah, then thank you very much, everybody, for attending. It's really been a very good session. I really love to see things at work and not the theory and concept that you can pick up from any textbook environment. I'm sure there are many follow-up questions when you go through the whole idea. And yeah, of course, Christina is not only sitting in Bonn. No, she will present at our upcoming CI conference in Bad Nauheim as well. That's April 19th to 22nd. So 20 and 21st is conference, and before and after some workshops. So for those who want to really meet her and of course attend our conference, there's an option here. Otherwise, you see some other certificate programs coming up. This session, as well as some other webinars, will end up on our website, complimentary, so you can review, share, and learn a lot from other sessions, hopefully, if you just go to the Institute for Competitive Intelligence website. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Christina Sterenborg, for your presentation. I enjoyed it very much, and I'm sure all the participants did as well.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and whoever will come to Bad Nauheim, I'd be happy to meet you and to get your view on scenario planning.
Okay, so thanks a lot. Enjoy your afternoon, morning, or evening, whichever time zone you might be in, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.